The distant wail of a train whistle cut through the autumn air as Rose Taylor stood motionless on the platform of Presidio, Texas, clutching a letter that had altered the course of her life, forever a letter stained with both ink and tears, announcing her fiancé's betrayal and leaving her stranded in a town where she knew no one but the ghosts of her shattered dreams. The year was 1875, and Rose had traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston with hope in her heart and a wedding dress in her trunk, only to discover that the man who had promised her the world had already claimed another. The crisp October air bit at her cheeks, turning them as red as her name, while her auburn hair whipped around her face from beneath a practical bonnet that had seen better days. "Madam." "The station's closing for the night," said the elderly attendant, his voice gruff but his eyes sympathetic as he watched her standing there, looking like a lost soul at the gates of purgatory. "Yes, of course," Rose replied, folding the letter and tucking it into her reticule. "Could you recommend lodgings? Something respectable?" The old man scratched his gray beard. "Widow Henshaw runs a boarding house for ladies. 2 blocks that way, yellow house with blue shutters. Tell her Silas sent you." "Thank you," Rose said, gathering her courage along with her small valise. Her larger trunks would have to wait until morning. She had enough troubles for one night. As she stepped off the platform, the heel of her city boot caught in the uneven dirt of the main street, nearly sending her sprawling into the dusty road. A strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her before she could fall face first into the indignity that would surely be the final straw of this wretched day. "Careful there, miss. These streets ain't like the cobblestones back east," came a deep, molasses slow voice that made Rose look up into the most startling blue eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His cowboy hat cast shadows across features that might have been carved from the very mountains that rimmed the horizon. He wasn't handsome in the refined way of Boston gentlemen, but there was something about him that commanded attention, perhaps the quiet confidence or the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," Rose said stiffly, withdrawing her arm from his grasp. "I'm perfectly capable of walking on my own." The cowboy tipped his hat. "Never suggested otherwise, madam. Name's Wade Wilson, at your service." Rose noticed that despite his rough exterior, his manners were impeccable. Still, she had learned her lesson about trusting charming men with kind words. "Miss Taylor," she replied curtly, offering nothing more. "New to Presidio?" Wade asked, falling into step beside her as she continued down the street, his spurs jingling softly with each stride. "Is it that obvious?" Rose sighed, glancing down at her travel-worn but unmistakably Eastern attire. "Like a rose in a cactus patch," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Headed somewhere in particular?" "Widow Henshaw's boarding house," Rose replied reluctantly, realizing she might need directions after all. "Allow me to escort you. These streets can be unpredictable after sunset." Rose hesitated. She hadn't come this far to put herself at the mercy of another man's false promises. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Wilson. I'm sure I can find my way." "Suit yourself," Wade said easily. "But seeing as we're heading in the same direction, might be sensible to walk together." Before Rose could respond, shouts erupted from a nearby saloon, and 3 drunken cowboys stumbled out onto the street, arguing loudly. One of them spotted Rose and gave a wolf whistle. Wade stepped slightly in front of her, his posture relaxed but alert. The drunks took one look at him and decided to continue their revelry elsewhere. "Still think you don't need an escort?" Wade asked quietly. Rose swallowed her pride. "Perhaps just to the boarding house." They walked in silence for a moment before Wade spoke again. So what brings a lady like yourself to our little corner of nowhere? A mistake, Rose said before she could stop herself. I mean, a change of circumstances. Wade nodded, not pressing further. Life has a way of throwing changes at us when we least expect them. Yes, well, sometimes those changes are for the best, Rose replied, though she didn't believe it for a moment. Right now, her future stretched before her like the vast Texas desert, empty and unforgiving. Here we are, Wade announced as they reached a neat yellow house with blue shutters, just as Sela's had described. A warm light glowed in the windows, promising comfort if not exactly home. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, Rose said formally, climbing the steps to the porch. Wade, he corrected with a smile. Folks around here don't stand much on ceremony. Well, I'm not from around here, Rose reminded him. No, madam, you surely are not, Wade agreed, his eyes twinkling. But Presidio has a way of growing on people. I don't intend to stay long enough to find out, Rose informed him, lifting her chin slightly. Never say never, Miss Taylor. West Texas has changed minds more stubborn than yours. I doubt that very much, Rose said, knocking on the door. I hope our paths cross again, Wade said, tipping his hat once more. That seems unlikely, Rose replied coolly. The door opened to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Can I help you, dear? She asked, taking in Rose's travel-worn appearance. Are you Widow Henshaw? Sela's at the station recommended your boarding house. That I am. And you, Mr. Wilson. The widow's eyes narrowed slightly as she addressed the cowboy still standing at the bottom of the steps. Just escorting the lady safely to your door, Mrs. Henshaw, Wade replied respectfully. The widow's expression softened. Well, that's gentlemanly of you, Miss. Taylor, Rose Taylor, she supplied. Come in, Miss Taylor. I have one room available, though it's small. That will be fine, Rose said gratefully, stepping inside. Before the door closed, she glanced back to see Wade Wilson still standing there, watching her with those piercing blue eyes. Good night, Rose Taylor, he called softly. Good night, Mr. Wilson, she replied, and then the door shut firmly between them. Widow Henshaw showed Rose to a small but clean room on the second floor. Bathrooms down the hall. Breakfast at 7 sharp. No gentlemen callers in the rooms, and curfew is 9 o'clock. That sounds perfect, Rose said, sinking onto the narrow bed. That cowboy, Mrs. Henshaw said casually as she handed Rose a fresh towel. He's one of the good ones. Foreman at the Circle W Ranch. Honest as the day is long. I'm sure he is, Rose replied noncommittally. But I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. The older woman studied her for a moment. Running from something or someone, Rose stiffened. I came to meet my fiancé. He had other ideas. Understanding dawned in Mrs. Henshaw's eyes. I see. Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need while you figure things out. Presidio isn't Boston, but it has its charms. Thank you, Rose said. But I'll likely be on the next train east as soon as I can arrange it. After Mrs. Henshaw left, Rose unpinned her hair and sat by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar constellation of stars that hung over this strange, wild land. She had never felt so alone, so betrayed, or so uncertain of her future. In Boston, she had been the daughter of a respected physician, engaged to a promising young lawyer. Now she was nobody, just another woman scorned in a town where she knew no one and nothing. One night, she whispered to herself. Get through one night, and tomorrow you'll start finding your way home. But as she drifted off to sleep, it was not thoughts of Boston that followed her into dreams, but the memory of startling blue eyes and the echo of spurs on a dusty street. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and bacon drifting up the stairs. Rose dressed quickly in her second-best traveling outfit, a practical navy blue skirt and jacket with a white shirtwaist. Her other clothes were still in her trunks at the station, and she would need to retrieve them before making arrangements to return east. At breakfast, she met the other boarders' two schoolteachers, a milliner's assistant, and a young woman who worked as a telegraph operator. All were polite but curious about the newcomer. "So you came all this way to marry, and he wasn't even there to meet you?" asked Miss Abigail Porter, the younger of the two teachers, her eyes wide with sympathy. "He was otherwise engaged," Rose replied tightly, not wanting to discuss Charles's letter explaining that he had reconnected with his childhood sweetheart while establishing his law practice in Presidio. "Men," huffed Miss Beatrice Winters, the telegraph operator. "Can't trust a single one of them farther than you can throw them." "Not all men are cut from the same cloth," Mrs. Henshaw interjected, refilling coffee cups. "My Harold was true blue for 30 years until the consumption took him." "Well, the good ones are few and far between," Miss Winters insisted. "No offense to your Harold." "What will you do now?" asked the milliner's assistant, a shy girl named Emma. Rose straightened her shoulders. "Return to Boston, of course." "What's waiting for you there, Mrs.?" Henshaw asked gently. The question caught Rose off guard. What was waiting for her? Her father had died last winter, leaving her with modest savings but no family home. Her mother had passed years earlier. Her friends were all married and starting families. Going back meant facing pity and whispers. "I have prospects," she said vaguely. "My father was a physician." "We could use a doctor's daughter around here," Mrs. Henshaw remarked. "Dr. Fulton is getting on in years, and his hands shake something fierce when he tries to stitch a wound." Rose nearly choked on her coffee. "I'm not a doctor myself. I merely assisted my father occasionally. Still more medical knowledge than anyone else in 50 miles, Mrs. Henshaw pointed out. "Just something to consider before you rush back east." After breakfast, Rose walked to the station to arrange for her trunks to be delivered to the boarding house. She would need to assess her financial situation before purchasing a return ticket. Charles had promised to reimburse her travel expenses, but his letter had contained no money, only apologies and the news that he had married his Jessica the previous month. The morning was crisp and clear, the sky an impossible blue that seemed to stretch forever. Despite her determination not to be charmed by this rugged country, Rose found herself pausing to admire the distant mountains, purple with shadow in the morning light. At the station, she found Silas arguing with a tall man whose back was to her, a familiar back with broad shoulders under a worn leather vest. "Mr. Wilson," she said, approaching cautiously. Wade turned, surprise and pleasure lighting his features. "Miss Taylor, good morning to you." "Is there a problem?" she asked, noticing the scowl on Silas's face. "Just a misunderstanding about some freight," Wade explained. "Nothing for you to worry about," Silas harumphed. "Wilson here thinks his cattle feed should take priority over everything else." "The feed was supposed to arrive 3 days ago," Wade countered reasonably. "I've got 200 head of cattle waiting to fatten up before winter sets in." Rose watched the exchange with interest. Wade's tone remained even, but there was steel beneath his polite words. He was clearly a man accustomed to getting his way, not through bullying but through sheer determination. "I need to arrange for my trunks to be delivered to Mrs. Henshaw's," Rose interjected when there was a pause in the men's discussion. "The drayage man won't be back until afternoon," Silas informed her, "and he's already got a full load." Rose's face fell. Her clothing and personal items were in those trunks along with most of her money. "I see. Is there anyone else who might be available? I can take you," Wade offered. "Got my wagon outside loading up feed. Your trunks won't be any trouble." Rose hesitated. Accepting his help would place her in his debt, and she was wary of owing anything to any man right now, but practicality won out. "That would be very kind, thank you." 20 minutes later, Rose found herself perched on the seat of a sturdy wagon beside Wade Wilson as they made their way through town. Her trunks were secured in the back along with several sacks of feed. "So," Wade said casually as he guided the team of horses, "how long do you plan to grace Presidio with your presence?" "Not long," Rose replied. "As soon as I sort out my affairs." "And what affairs might those be, if you don't mind my asking?" Rose hesitated, then decided there was no point in secrecy. The whole town would know soon enough. "I came to marry a man who decided to marry someone else instead. Now I need to decide what to do next." Wade whistled softly. "That's a harsh welcome to Texas." "Yes, well, life is full of disappointments," Rose said stiffly. "That it is," Wade agreed. "Though sometimes those disappointments lead us where we need to be, even if it wasn't where we planned to go." Rose glanced at him curiously. "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his face. "I've had my share of unexpected turns. Lost my wife and baby 5 years back. Fever took them both." "I'm so sorry," Rose said, genuinely moved by the pain she saw in his eyes. "Been a long road since then," Wade continued, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But I've made peace with it. Can't change the past, can only decide what to do with the future." They rode in thoughtful silence for a moment before Wade changed the subject. "So, what did you do back in Boston, besides being a physician's daughter?" "I assisted my father in his practice," Rose explained. "Managed his appointments, kept his records, sometimes helped with minor treatments." "Sounds like valuable experience," Wade remarked. "It was," Rose agreed, remembering the satisfaction of helping her father's patients. "I enjoyed the work." "Our town doctor could use some help," Wade suggested. "Old Doc Fulton's got the knowledge, but his hands aren't steady anymore." Rose shook her head. "Mrs. Henshaw mentioned that as well, but I'm not qualified to practice medicine." "Maybe not as a doctor," Wade conceded, "but as an assistant. Someone who knows which end of a bandage is which would be mighty welcome around here." The idea planted a tiny seed in Rose's mind. She did have skills that could be useful, and the thought of returning to Boston to face pitying stares and whispers behind fans was increasingly unappealing. They arrived at the boarding house, and Wade effortlessly unloaded her trunks, carrying them up to her room as if they weighed nothing. "Thank you," Rose said when he set the last one down. "You've been very kind." Wade smiled, that same smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and seemed to light up his weathered face. "Just being neighborly. Town this size, we look out for each other. Even strangers?" Rose asked skeptically. "Especially strangers," Wade replied. "They're just friends we haven't made yet." Despite herself, Rose felt a smile tugging at her lips. "That's a very optimistic view." "I'm an optimistic man," Wade said with a wink. "Have to be in the ranching business, always gambling on rain that might not come or prices that might not hold." "It sounds precarious," Rose observed. "Life is precarious," Wade countered, "but worth living all the same." After he left, Rose sat on her bed, contemplating her options. The practical thing would be to return to Boston immediately. She had enough money for a ticket, though it would leave her with little to start over. But what would she be returning to? An empty apartment. The challenge of finding respectable work as a single woman approaching 30, a knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Henshaw stood there with a concerned expression. "Miss Taylor, there's someone to see you downstairs." Rose's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Charles coming to apologize, to explain that it had all been a terrible mistake? But when she descended the stairs, it was not her former fiancé waiting for her but a short, elderly gentleman with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose. "Miss Taylor, "I'm Dr. Fulton," he introduced himself, holding out a hand that trembled slightly. "Heard you might have some medical experience." Rose shot a glance at Mrs. Henshaw, who looked suspiciously innocent as she busied herself with dusting a nearby table. "I assisted my father, who was a physician in Boston," Rose clarified. "I'm not trained myself. Don't need training for what I have in mind, Doctor," Fulton said, waving away her concern. "Need someone to help organize my office, keep my supplies in order, maybe assist with simple procedures. Mrs. Wilson mentioned you might be looking for something to occupy your time while you're here." "Mrs. Wilson," Rose echoed, confused. "Wade's mother," Mrs. Henshaw supplied. "She's on the town council. News travels fast in Presidio." Rose wasn't sure whether to be irritated or amused that her situation was apparently being discussed by people she'd never even met. "Doctor Fulton, I appreciate the offer, but I'm planning to return east as soon as possible." "Well, until then," the doctor persisted, "my office is in shambles and these old hands aren't what they used to be. Could use help just for a few days if you're willing. Pay you fair wages too." Rose hesitated. She could use the money, and it would give her something productive to do while she sorted out her plans. "I suppose I could help for a short time." Dr. Fulton beamed. "Excellent. Can you start tomorrow, 8 o'clock? Before she quite knew what was happening, Rose had agreed, and the doctor was shuffling out the door, leaving her wondering how her plan for a quick departure had already begun to unravel. "He's a good man," Mrs. Henshaw said, abandoning the pretense of dusting. "Been doctor here for 40 years. Delivered most of the townsfolk, including Wade Wilson." "Speaking of Mr. Wilson," Rose said, "he seems to have taken quite an interest in my situation." Mrs. Henshaw smiled knowingly. "Wade's got a good heart. Lost his Elizabeth and their baby to childbed fever some years back. Threw himself into building up the Circle W after that. Most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, but he hasn't looked twice at a woman since Elizabeth died." "Until now," Rose said dryly. Mrs. Henshaw's smile widened. "I couldn't say. But a man doesn't usually escort a lady he's just met or offer to haul her trunks unless something about her catches his eye." "Well, he's wasting his time," Rose declared firmly. "I have no interest in jumping from one disastrous romantic entanglement to another." "Of course not, dear Mrs. Henshaw agreed, though her tone suggested she thought otherwise. "Now, will you be joining us for lunch?" Emma brought fresh bread from the bakery. The next morning, Rose presented herself at Dr. Fulton's office, a small wooden building on the main street with a faded sign that read Dr. H. Fulton, physician and surgeon. The interior was exactly as the doctor had described in shambles. Papers were stacked haphazardly on every surface, medicine bottles stood uncapped, instruments lay where they had last been used instead of being properly cleaned and stored. "Good heavens," Rose murmured, surveying the chaos. "Told you it was bad," Dr. Fulton said cheerfully, emerging from a back room. "Elizabeth Wilson used to help keep things in order, but after she passed, well, never found anyone with her knack for organization." Rose felt a twinge of sympathy for Wade, hearing his late wife's name again. "Where would you like me to start?" "Anywhere," the doctor said with a wave of his hand. "Can't make it worse." Rose rolled up her sleeves and set to work. By midday, she had cleared the front desk, organized the patient records, and was in the process of inventorying medical supplies when the door opened with a jingle of the bell. "Doc, got a situation at the ranch." Wade Wilson stopped mid-sentence when he saw Rose standing behind the desk, her hair slightly mussed from her efforts and a smudge of dust on her cheek. "Miss Taylor," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to find you here." "Mr. Wilson," Rose acknowledged with a nod. Dr. Fulton hired me to help organize his office. A slow smile spread across Wade's face. Is that so? And here I thought you were heading back east as soon as possible. Rose felt her cheeks warm. It's a temporary arrangement, Doctor. Fulton is in the back room. Wade continued to regard her with that knowing smile. I'll just go find him then. As he passed the desk, he paused. You've got a bit of dust, he said, gesturing to his own cheek. Rose quickly wiped at her face, embarrassed. There, Wade said softly. Perfect. Something in his tone made her look up, and for a moment, their eyes met and held. Then Wade cleared his throat and continued to the back room, leaving Rose with a peculiar fluttering sensation in her chest. She could hear the men's voices as they discussed whatever situation had brought Wade to town. Something about a ranch hand injured in a fall from a horse. Can't move him, Wade was saying. Legs busted bad and he's in a world of pain. I'll gather my things, Dr. Fulton replied. Miss Taylor, would you prepare a kit for setting a broken leg? Bandages, splints, laudanum for the pain. Rose hesitated only briefly before nodding and assembling the necessary items. Her father had taught her well, and she had assisted him in setting many broken bones over the years. Will you manage on your own, Doctor? She asked as she handed him the medical bag. The organization here is still far from complete. Actually, Dr. Fulton said thoughtfully, might be good if you came along. These old hands aren't as steady as they once were, especially after a long, buggy ride. I couldn't possibly, Rose began. It's Jim Farley, Wade interrupted. He's young, just a kid really, scared half to death. Might help to have a woman's gentle touch. Rose wavered. Her father had always said that a doctor's first duty was to those in need. Very well, she agreed finally. But I'll only assist as directed. An hour later, Rose found herself in a bunkhouse at the Circle W Ranch, watching as Dr. Fulton examined a young cowboy's grotesquely angled leg. The boy, for he couldn't have been more than 17, was pale with pain but trying not to show it. Clean break, Doctor. Fulton announced. Need to set it before the swelling gets worse. Miss Taylor, prepare the laudanum. Rose measured the pain medication carefully, helping Jim drink it down. This will ease the pain, she assured him. Try to relax. While they waited for the laudanum to take effect, Rose took the opportunity to glance around the bunkhouse. It was simple but clean, with bunks lining the walls and a large stove in the center. Wade stood nearby, his face creased with concern for his young ranch hand. Ready, Doctor? Fulton asked after a few minutes. Jim nodded groggily, the laudanum beginning to work. I'll need help holding him steady, the doctor said. Wade, get his shoulders. Miss Taylor, stabilize the upper leg while I manipulate the brake. Rose positioned herself as directed, her hands firm but gentle on Jim's thigh. She could feel Wade's eyes on her, watching as she worked with calm efficiency. On 3, Dr. Fulton said. 1, 2. He pulled sharply on the lower leg before reaching 3, a common physician's trick to catch the patient off guard. Jim cried out despite the laudanum, then subsided into whimpers as Dr. Fulton quickly aligned the broken bone. Hand me the splints, Miss Taylor, the doctor directed. Rose worked alongside the doctor, anticipating his needs and providing the right materials at the right moment. Her father had trained her well, and despite the years since she had last assisted with such a procedure, her hands remembered. When the leg was splinted and bandaged, Doctor. Fulton sat back with a satisfied sigh. Well done. He'll need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks. He can stay here, Wade assured them. The boys will look after him. As they packed up the medical supplies, Dr. Fulton turned to Rose. You have a real talent, Miss Taylor. Sure you never considered medicine as a profession? Rose smiled sadly. It wasn't an option for women in Boston, at least not in respectable circles. Well, out here we're less concerned with what's respectable and more with what's useful, Wade remarked. And what you did today was mighty useful. Indeed, Dr. Fulton agreed. In fact, I'd like to expand our arrangement, not just organizing the office, but assisting with patients too. What do you say? Rose was taken aback. I don't know. I still plan to return east eventually. No rush on deciding, the doctor said easily. But the offer stands. As they prepared to leave, Wade approached Rose. I'll drive you back to town, he offered. Doc, you mind if Tom takes you in the buggy? I need to stop at the Peterson place on the way. Doctor. Fulton agreed readily. And before Rose could formulate an objection, she found herself in Wade's wagon again, this time bouncing along a rutted ranch road as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the land. You were impressive back there, Wade commented after they had traveled in silence for a while. Not many women could handle a broken bone without flinching. I've assisted with worse, Rose replied. My father believed in practical education. He sounds like a wise man. He was, Rose said softly. I miss him every day. Wade nodded, understanding. That kind of missing doesn't go away, just changes shape over time. The simple truth of his words resonated with Rose. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Beautiful country, isn't it? Wade remarked eventually, gesturing to the vast landscape around them, painted in hues of gold and amber by the setting sun. Rose had to admit it was breathtaking. Different from what I'm used to. In Boston, everything is so contained. Buildings and streets and parks all neatly arranged. Out here, it's endless. That's what I love about it, Wade said, his voice warm with affection for his home. The endless possibility, room to breathe, room to begin again. Rose glanced at him sharply. Is that what you did, began again? Wade's expression grew thoughtful. Had to. After Elizabeth and the baby died, nothing made sense anymore. Had to find a new way to live, a reason to keep going. And did you find a reason? Rose asked softly. The ranch helps, Wade replied. Building something that will last. Making a home for people who need one, like young Jim back there. It's not the life I planned, but it has its own kind of meaning. Rose thought about her own shattered plans. The life she had envisioned with Charles now existed only in her imagination, while this unexpected reality helping Dr. Fulton, living at Mrs. Henshaw's, riding through the West Texas evening with a cowboy was tangibly, undeniably real. This Peterson place, she said, changing the subject. Is it far? Just over the next rise, Wade replied. Clara Peterson's expecting, her first, wanted to check if she needs anything from town. That's thoughtful of you, Wade shrugged. Her husband's away driving cattle to the railhead, won't be back for weeks. Neighbors look out for each other out here. Have to. The Peterson place turned out to be a small but well-maintained homestead with a vegetable garden in front and chickens pecking in the yard. A young woman heavy with child appeared in the doorway as they approached. Wade Wilson, is that you? She called, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Evening, Clara, Wade replied, helping Rose down from the wagon. Brought someone to meet you. This is Miss Rose Taylor. She's helping Dr. Fulton these days. Clara's face lit up. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Taylor. Please come in. The interior of the small house was spotlessly clean and decorated with simple but charming touches, curtains made from flower sacks, a braided rug, wildflowers in a mason jar on the table. How are you feeling? Wade asked Clara as she lowered herself carefully into a rocking chair. Like I'm carrying a future bronc rider, Clara replied with a tired smile. Keeps me up half the night with his kicking. When are you due? Rose asked, her medical training automatically assessing the young woman's condition. Doctor. Fulton says another 3 weeks, but my mother always said first babies come when they please. Your mother was a wise woman, Rose agreed. Are you prepared? Do you have everything you need? Clara's smile faltered slightly. Most things. Mrs. Wilson Wade's mother has been bringing supplies. But I'm a bit worried about the actual birth. Being alone, I mean. Rose glanced at Wade, who was watching the exchange with interest. Surely you won't be alone. Isn't there a midwife or neighbor who can stay with you? Nearest midwife is in Alpine, Wade explained. And the neighboring women all have their own families to tend. Mrs. Henshaw said she'd come if she could get someone to watch the boarding house. I see, Rose said slowly, her mind working through the implications. A woman alone during childbirth was vulnerable, especially a first-time mother. I don't suppose. Clara began hesitantly, looking at Rose with hope in her eyes. You said you work with Dr. Fulton. Do you know anything about birthing babies? Rose hesitated. She had assisted her father many times during deliveries, but she was not a midwife. I have some experience, she admitted cautiously. But I'm not. She's being modest, Wade interrupted. Miss Taylor is a physician's daughter with considerable experience. Helped set Jim Farley's leg today like she'd been doing it all her life. Clara's face brightened. Would you consider staying with me when the time comes? Just until my John returns or the baby arrives, whichever happens first. Rose was torn. She didn't want to make commitments that would further delay her return to Boston, yet she couldn't ignore the young woman's need. I would need to discuss it with Dr. Fulton, she said finally. And Mrs. Henshaw. Of course, Clara agreed quickly, but please think about it. It would ease my mind considerably. After checking that Clara had enough supplies and promising to return soon, Rose and Wade continued their journey toward town. The sun had set, and the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. Thank you for bringing me, Rose said after a while. Mrs. Peterson seems very young to be facing childbirth alone. She's 19, Wade confirmed. John's only 21. They came from Tennessee last year looking for a fresh start. He's a good worker, took to ranching like he was born to it, but this cattle drive couldn't wait. It's their livelihood. It's admirable that you look out for them, Rose observed. Wade shrugged. Like I said, that's how it works out here. We all depend on each other. As they approached Presidio, the lights of the town twinkling in the darkness, Rose realized with surprise that she had enjoyed the day despite its unexpected turns. There was a satisfaction in using her skills to help others, a feeling of purpose she hadn't experienced since her father's death. Penny for your thoughts, Wade asked, noticing her contemplative silence. I was just thinking how differently this day turned out than I had planned, Rose admitted. When I woke up this morning, I intended to organize medical records, not set broken bones or meet expectant mothers. Life's full of surprises, Wade said with a smile. Some of them even turn out to be good ones. As they pulled up in front of the boarding house, Rose saw that most of the windows were dark. It was past the 9 o'clock curfew. Mrs. Henshaw will have locked the door, she realized with dismay. Knock, Wade suggested. She'll understand once you explain. But despite repeated knocking, there was no answer. The house remained dark and silent. She must be asleep, Rose said, concern creeping into her voice. I have no way to get in. Wade considered the situation. You could stay at the hotel, but at this hour it might raise eyebrows. There's my mother's house. She's always got a spare room ready. Rose's pride rebelled at the thought of imposing on strangers, but she had limited options. I wouldn't want to intrude. Nonsense, Wade said firmly. She'd be delighted to have company. She lives just on the edge of town. We can be there in 5 minutes. Too tired to argue further, Rose agreed. True to Wade's word, they soon arrived at a comfortable-looking house set back from the road, with a well-tended garden and a wide porch. Despite the late hour, warm light still glowed from the windows, and a slender woman with silver-streaked dark hair opened the door before they had even reached the porch steps. "Wade," she called, "is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mother," he assured her. "This is Miss Rose Taylor. She's been helping Dr. Fulton today and got locked out of the boarding house. I thought perhaps she could use your spare room for the night." Mrs. Wilson's face broke into a warm smile. "Of course. Come in, dear. You must be exhausted." Before Rose quite knew what was happening, she found herself ushered into a cozy parlor, a cup of tea in her hands and Mrs. Wilson fussing over her like a mother hen. "Margaret Wilson," the older woman introduced herself properly. "You poor thing, running all over the county with my son and then finding yourself locked out. Wade, fetch Miss Taylor's bag from the wagon." "It's very kind of you to take me in, Mrs. Wilson," Rose said, sipping the fragrant tea gratefully. "I hope it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Mrs. Wilson assured her. "It's a pleasure to have female company. Living with just my son and ranch hands, I miss women's conversation." Wade returned with Rose's small valise. "I'll head back to the ranch now, Mother. Need to check on Jim." "Of course, dear." "Be careful on the road." Before leaving, Wade paused beside Rose's chair. "Thank you again for your help today. Jim's grateful and so am I." "I was glad to be useful," Rose replied honestly. "You were more than useful," Wade said quietly. "You were extraordinary." With that, he tipped his hat and was gone, leaving Rose with a curious warmth that had nothing to do with the tea she was drinking. Mrs. Wilson showed her to a charming guest room with a handmade quilt on the bed and fresh flowers on the dresser. Bathrooms across the hall. Towels in the chest there. Breakfast at 7, but sleep as long as you need. "Thank you," Rose said sincerely, "for everything." "No need for thanks," Mrs. Wilson replied with a smile. "Any friend of Wade's is welcome here." "I'm not exactly," Rose began, then stopped herself. What exactly was she to Wade Wilson? A chance acquaintance? A damsel in distress he had repeatedly rescued? A potential friend? "Whatever you are or aren't," Mrs. Wilson said shrewdly, "my son doesn't bring just anyone to my doorstep at this hour. Rest well, Miss Taylor." Left alone, Rose changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the day's events and the unexpected path her life seemed to be taking. One thing was becoming clear: returning to Boston no longer seemed as urgent as it had yesterday. As she drifted off to sleep, it wasn't memories of Charles or Boston that filled her mind, but the image of Wade's face as he had called her extraordinary, his blue eyes warm with admiration, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. The next morning, Rose awoke to the aroma of coffee and bacon, feeling more rested than she had in weeks. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting dappled patterns on the braided rug. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, pinning her hair as neatly as possible without her usual toiletries. When she entered the kitchen, she found Mrs. Wilson at the stove, humming as she flipped hot cakes. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in ages," Rose admitted, accepting a cup of coffee with gratitude. "West Texas air will do that," Mrs. Wilson said with satisfaction. "Now sit and eat. There's plenty." As they shared breakfast, Mrs. Wilson proved to be a delightful conversationalist, full of stories about Presidio and its inhabitants. She had come to Texas as a young bride 30 years earlier, when the town was little more than a trading post. "William Wade's father built our first ranch house with his own hands," she reminisced. "Just a 2-room cabin back then. We added on as the family grew and the ranch prospered." "Wade mentioned he lost his wife," Rose said hesitantly, unsure if she was treading on sensitive ground. Mrs. Wilson's face softened with old grief. Elizabeth, such a sweet girl. She and Wade were childhood sweethearts, married right out of school. The fever took her and their little one 5 years ago. Wade was changed after that, withdrew into himself, threw himself into the ranch work. It's only recently he's started to come back to us. Rose digested this information thoughtfully. He seems very devoted to the community, checking on Mrs. Peterson, helping with Jim Farley. That's Wade, Mrs. Wilson agreed, always looking out for others, even when his own heart was breaking. It's how he copes, I think, by making sure no one else suffers if he can help it. After breakfast, Mrs. Wilson insisted on lending Rose a fresh shirtwaist before walking with her to the boarding house. Mrs. Henshaw was profusely apologetic about the locked door. I was called away to my sister's. Her rheumatism was acting up something fierce. Left a note on the door, but it must have blown away. I'm so sorry, Miss Taylor. No harm done, Rose assured her. Mrs. Wilson was kind enough to take me in. Margaret Wilson is the salt of the earth, Mrs. Henshaw declared. Now, Dr. Fulton came by earlier looking for you, said to tell you he needs you at the office as soon as you're able. Rose hurried to change into fresh clothes from her trunk before making her way to the doctor's office. She found him with a line of patients already waiting, a mother with a feverish child, an old man with a persistent cough, a young woman clearly in the family way. There you are, Dr. Fulton greeted her with relief. Got my hands full today. Can you start with Mrs. Donovan's boy there? Probably just a cold, but check his ears and throat. Rose hesitated only briefly before rolling up her sleeves and getting to work. By midday, she had examined 3 children, bandaged a woodcutter's hand, and prepared a tonic for the old man's cough. You're a natural, Doctor, Fulton told her as they shared a quick lunch of sandwiches brought over by the baker's wife. The way you handle the patients, the confidence in your diagnoses, you sure you never had formal training. Just what my father taught me, Rose replied, and years of observation. Well, you've got a gift, the doctor insisted, and I've got a proposition for you. Rose raised an eyebrow. Oh, stay, work with me, not just organizing but as a proper assistant, even take on some patients of your own under my supervision. Heaven knows we need the help around here, and you need, well, a fresh start seems to me. The offer took Rose by surprise. Dr. Fulton, I appreciate your confidence, but I've only been here 3 days. I hardly know anyone and no one knows me. Sometimes 3 days is enough, the doctor replied simply. I've been practicing medicine for 40 years, Miss Taylor. I know capability when I see it. Before Rose could respond, the door opened and Wade Wilson stepped in, looking more formally dressed than she had seen him before, in a clean shirt and vest, his hat in his hands. Miss Taylor, he said, his eyes warming at the sight of her. Mother said I'd find you here. Hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Dr. Fulton said before Rose could respond. In fact, your timing is perfect. I've just asked Miss Taylor to stay on as my assistant, and I think she's about to refuse me. Wade looked at Rose questioningly. Is that so? Mind if I ask why? Rose felt suddenly defensive. I have a life back in Boston. Plans. Plans change, Wade said simply. Sometimes for the better. That's easy for you to say, Rose retorted. You've lived here your whole life. You have connections, family, a purpose. I have none of those things here. You could, Wade suggested quietly, if you gave it a chance. The intensity in his gaze made Rose's heart flutter unexpectedly. Mr. Wilson, actually, he interrupted, I came to invite you to dinner. At the ranch. Saturday night. Mother's hosting a little gathering, nothing fancy. Thought you might enjoy meeting some folks from around the county. Rose was momentarily speechless. Was he asking to court her? Or was this merely the neighborliness he had spoken of? "That's very kind," she managed finally, "but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition if you're invited," Wade pointed out with a smile. "And you are definitely invited." Dr. Fulton watched this exchange with poorly concealed amusement. "You should go, Miss Taylor. Margaret Wilson's gatherings are the highlight of the social calendar around here." Rose felt cornered, though not unpleasantly so. "Very well, thank you for the invitation." Wade's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll pick you up at the boarding house at 5 on Saturday." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Miss Taylor, think about the doctor's offer. We could use someone like you around here." After he left, Rose turned to find Dr. Fulton grinning at her. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing," the doctor said innocently. "Just noting that Wade Wilson doesn't invite just anyone to his mother's dinner parties. And he certainly doesn't drive into town in the middle of a workday to deliver the invitation personally." "I'm sure he was coming to town anyway," Rose said primly, though a small part of her hoped otherwise. Hum," Dr. Fulton murmured skeptically. "Now, about my offer." "Let me think about it," Rose conceded. "I'll give you an answer after the weekend." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Rose continued working at Dr. Fulton's office, gradually taking on more responsibility as the doctor's confidence in her abilities grew. She also paid several visits to Clara Peterson, bringing supplies and offering reassurance to the nervous young mother-to-be. By Saturday, Rose had to admit, if only to herself, that she was looking forward to the evening at the Wilson Ranch. She had even splurged on a new dress, a modest but becoming gown of deep green silk that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. As she dressed for the evening, the other boarders gathered in her room to offer advice and assistance. "Wear your hair up but with a few curls framing your face," suggested Miss Porter, the schoolteacher. "Men like that soft look. And for heaven's sake, don't talk about medical things at dinner," Miss Winters added. "Men are squeamish about such matters." Rose laughed. "I'm not trying to impress anyone." The other women exchanged knowing looks. "Of course not, dear," Mrs. Henshaw said diplomatically. "But Wade Wilson is the most eligible bachelor in the county, and he's showing a marked interest in you." "He's being neighborly," Rose insisted, though the flutter in her stomach whenever she thought of Wade suggested she hoped it was more than that. At precisely 5 o'clock, Wade arrived at the boarding house. Rose descended the stairs to find him waiting in the parlor, looking striking in a tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He held his hat in his hands, and his usually wind-blown hair was neatly combed. "Miss Taylor," he said, his voice warm with appreciation as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," Rose replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Wilson." Wade offered his arm with a smile. "Shall we?" The drive to the Circle W Ranch took about half an hour, during which Wade pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. Rose found herself relaxing in his company, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. "How's Jim Farley's leg?" she asked as they approached the ranch. "Healing well, thanks to your skilled hands," Wade replied. "He's bored senseless, but the boys keep his spirits up with cards and tall tales. And Mrs. Peterson, getting more nervous by the day, but your visits have helped. She speaks very highly of you." Rose smiled, pleased that she had been able to offer some comfort to the young woman. The Wilson Ranch house was larger and more impressive than Rose had expected, a sprawling 2-story structure with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. Lanterns hung from the porch rafters, casting a warm glow over the arriving guests. "This is lovely," Rose commented as Wade helped her down from the buggy. "Been in the family for 3 generations now," Wade said with quiet pride. "My grandfather built the original section, and we've added to it over the years. Inside, the house was elegantly furnished with a mix of pieces that spoke of both comfort and taste. Mrs. Wilson greeted them warmly, taking Rose's wrap and introducing her to the other guests. There were about 20 people in all, neighboring ranchers and their wives, the town banker and his family, Dr. Fulton, and even the mayor of Presidio. Rose was surprised to find that she already recognized several faces from her work at the doctor's office. "Miss Taylor has been a godsend, Dr. Fulton told the gathered company during dinner. "I haven't had the office this organized in years, and she has a natural touch with patients." "Are you planning to stay in Presidio, Miss Taylor?" asked Mrs. Coleman, the banker's wife. Rose hesitated, aware of Wade watching her reaction from across the table. "I haven't decided yet," she answered truthfully. "Dr. Fulton has made me a generous offer to stay on as his assistant. We could certainly use someone with medical knowledge," Mayor Jenkins commented. "Especially with Doc Fulton thinking about retiring." "Retiring?" Rose echoed, turning to the doctor in surprise. Dr. Fulton looked slightly embarrassed. "Was planning to bring it up after you'd had a chance to settle in. Been thinking about it for a while now. These old bones are tired and my eyes aren't what they used to be." "But who would take over your practice?" Rose asked, concerned. "Well," the doctor said meaningfully, "I was hoping to train my replacement, someone with natural aptitude and a compassionate nature." All eyes turned to Rose, who felt a flush rising to her cheeks. "Surely you don't mean me. I have no formal medical training." "Neither did I when I started," Dr. Fulton admitted. "Learned from an old Army surgeon after the war. Got my formal credentials later, through apprenticeship and examination. Same path would be open to you if you were interested." Rose was speechless. The idea of becoming a physician, a real, qualified doctor, had been a secret dream she had never dared voice, even to her father. "It's something to consider," Wade said quietly, meeting her eyes across the table. "We need good doctors out here, and you've already proven your skill." After dinner, while the older guests settled in the parlor for coffee, Wade suggested a walk to show Rose the ranch. "It's a beautiful night," he said, offering his arm. "And the view from the hill behind the house is spectacular." The night was indeed beautiful, with a bright moon silvering the landscape and a canopy of stars overhead, unlike anything Rose had ever seen in Boston. "The stars are amazing," she breathed as they walked. "So many and so bright. No city lights to dim them," Wade explained. "That's one of the things I love about this place. You can see forever on a clear night." They climbed a gentle slope behind the house, eventually reaching a flat outcropping of rock that offered a panoramic view of the ranch and the surrounding countryside. "This was my thinking spot as a boy," Wade said as they sat on a smooth boulder. "Whenever I needed to sort things out, I'd come up here and look at the stars." "And did it help, the sorting out?" Rose asked. Wade smiled. "Usually. Something about the vastness of the sky puts problems in perspective." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Wade spoke again. "What would it take to convince you to stay, Rose?" The use of her first name sent a small thrill through her, but she tried to remain practical. "It's not that simple. I barely know this place, these people, and after what happened with Charles." "Ah," Wade said softly. "The man who wasn't waiting at the station." Rose nodded, the pain of betrayal still fresh despite the passage of days. "We were engaged for 2 years. He came west to establish a law practice, wrote to me faithfully every week, then invited me to join him to be married. I sold everything, traveled all this way, only to find he'd changed his mind," Wade finished for her. "He married someone else," Rose said flatly. "A childhood sweetheart he reconnected with here. He didn't even have the courage to tell me until I was already on the train." Wade's expression darkened. The man's a fool. Perhaps, Rose conceded. Or perhaps he simply realized we weren't suited after all. Either way, it's taught me a valuable lesson about second chances and making hasty decisions. Wade turned to face her fully, his eyes serious in the moonlight. Some people deserve second chances, Rose. Not the man who betrayed you, but perhaps this place, these people. They're good folks who need someone like you. And you? Rose asked softly. What do you need, Wade Wilson? For a long moment, Wade was silent, his gaze never leaving hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was husky with emotion. 5 years ago, I thought I'd never need anything again, never want anything, just existence day after day. But lately, I've started to remember what it feels like to hope for something more. Rose's heart quickened at his words. And what is it you hope for? Instead of answering, Wade reached out and gently tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I hope you'll give Presidio a chance. Give yourself a chance at the life you deserve. And what life is that? Rose whispered. One where your talents are valued, where you can make a difference, where you're surrounded by people who appreciate you for exactly who you are. Wade paused, then added softly, where you might, in time, find room in your heart to trust again. The implication was clear, and Rose felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the mild night air. Wade, you don't have to answer now, he interrupted gently. Just promise you'll think about it before you buy that train ticket east. Rose nodded, unable to find words for the tumult of emotions his nearness evoked. I promise. They walked back to the house in companionable silence, each lost in thought. As they approached the porch, Wade paused. One more thing, he said, turning to face her. There's a harvest dance next Saturday in town. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me? Rose hesitated only briefly. I'd like that, she admitted with a small smile. Wade's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. So would I, Rose Taylor, so would I. The days that followed brought a flurry of activity that left Rose little time to dwell on her uncertain future. A minor outbreak of influenza kept the doctor's office busy, and Rose found herself making house calls to outlying farms and ranches where families couldn't make it into town. By Friday, she was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. There was satisfaction in using her skills to ease suffering, in seeing the gratitude in patients' eyes, in knowing she was making a tangible difference in their lives. She had just finished organizing the medical supplies when Dr. Fulton entered, looking more tired than usual. Miss Taylor, he said without preamble, I've been called to Alpine. My brother's had a stroke. Need to leave right away. Of course, Rose replied immediately. Take all the time you need. I can manage things here. The doctor hesitated. It's a lot to ask. You'd be on your own, handling whatever comes through that door. I can do it, Rose assured him with more confidence than she felt. And if something is beyond my capabilities, I'll send for help from the next town, Doctor. Fulton studied her face for a long moment before nodding. I believe you can. There's a medical reference book in my desk left drawer, and a list of patients who need regular care. Mrs. Peterson should be checked on every other day. Her time's getting close. I'll see to everything, Rose promised. Don't worry about anything here. After the doctor left, Rose sat at his desk, running her fingers over the smooth wood surface. The responsibility he had entrusted to her was enormous, the health and well-being of an entire community. Yet instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt a curious sense of rightness, as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life without realizing it. The next morning, she awoke early and went to the office to review Dr. Fulton's notes and prepare for the day. She had just finished when there was an urgent knocking at the door. A breathless young boy stood there, his eyes wide with alarm. "Miss Taylor, it's Mrs. Peterson. The baby's coming and something's not right." Rose felt a flutter of panic, quickly suppressed by years of watching her father handle emergencies. "Tell me exactly what's happening, Tommy." "Ma sent me. She's with Mrs. Peterson now. Says the baby's trying to come feet first and Mrs. Peterson's bleeding something fierce. A breech birth. Dangerous under the best circumstances, potentially fatal without proper intervention. Go to the Circle W," Rose directed the boy. "Find Wade Wilson. Tell him what's happening and that I need him to bring my medical bag to the Peterson place immediately. I'll head there now." Without waiting for a response, Rose grabbed the medical reference book and a bag of basic supplies before hurrying toward the Peterson homestead. The walk would take 20 minutes at a brisk pace, but she had no faster means of transportation. She was about halfway there when she heard the sound of galloping hooves behind her. Turning, she saw Wade on horseback, her medical bag secured to his saddle. "Got your message," he called, reining in beside her. "Hop up behind me. We'll get there faster." Without hesitation, Rose gathered her skirts and allowed Wade to pull her up behind him on the horse. She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding tight as the horse resumed its gallop. "Tommy said it's a breech," Wade shouted over the wind. "Is that bad?" "It can be," Rose called back. "Depends on how far along the labor is and whether there are other complications." When they arrived at the Peterson place, the situation was dire. Clara lay on her bed, pale and sweating, while Mrs. Wilson and another neighbor woman tried to comfort her. The sheets were stained with blood. "Thank God you're here," Mrs. Wilson said, relief evident in her voice. "We've done what we can, but—" Rose was already rolling up her sleeves and washing her hands in the basin of water by the bed. "How long has she been in labor?" "Since yesterday afternoon," the neighbor woman replied. "Waters broke this morning, and that's when we saw the feet." Rose examined Clara quickly but thoroughly. The baby was indeed coming feet first, and the young woman was exhausted from hours of unproductive labor. Worse, the bleeding suggested the placenta might be separating prematurely. "Clara," Rose said gently but firmly, "I need you to listen carefully. Your baby is in a difficult position, but I've helped with births like this before. I'm going to try to turn the baby, but I need you to be very brave." Clara nodded weakly. "Save my baby, please." "I'm going to do everything I can for both of you," Rose promised. She turned to Wade, who stood awkwardly by the door. "I need clean towels, more hot water, and the strongest whiskey you can find." While Wade hurried to comply, Rose opened Dr. Fulton's medical reference, quickly locating the section on complicated deliveries. The procedure for turning a breech baby was described in detail, complete with illustrations. Taking a deep breath, Rose steeled herself for what needed to be done. She had assisted her father with similar cases, but never performed the maneuver herself. When Wade returned with the requested items, Rose had him wait outside with the other men who had gathered. Only Mrs. Wilson and the neighbor woman, Mrs. Thompson, remained to assist. "This will be painful," Rose warned Clara as she prepared, "but it's necessary to save the baby." Over the next hour, Rose worked with careful precision, following the book's instructions and her own instincts. Clara cried out in pain as Rose attempted to turn the baby, but eventually, with patience and gentle persistence, Rose felt the infant shift position. "The head is coming first now," she announced with relief. "When the next contraction comes, I need you to push with all your strength, Clara." 20 minutes later, a red-faced, squalling infant boy was placed on Clara's chest. The young mother's tears of pain turned to joy as she beheld her son for the first time. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you, Miss Taylor, thank you." Rose completed her work, stopping the bleeding and ensuring both mother and child were stable, before finally allowing herself to acknowledge the trembling in her own hands. When she emerged from the bedroom at last, she found Wade waiting patiently, his face etched with concern. "They're both fine," she told him, her voice raspy with fatigue. "A healthy baby boy." The tension in Wade's shoulders visibly released. "You did it." Rose nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. "I did." Without warning, her knees buckled. Wade caught her before she could fall, guiding her to a chair and pressing a cup of something strong into her hands. "Drink," he instructed. "Doctor's orders." Rose managed a weak smile before taking a sip of the whiskey. It burned down her throat, restoring some of her equilibrium. "I was terrified," she admitted quietly. "I've assisted with births before, but never one so complicated and never alone." "You weren't alone," Wade pointed out, "and you knew exactly what to do." Rose shook her head. "I followed the book and remembered what my father taught me. But there were moments when I thought." "But you didn't give up," Wade said firmly. "That's what matters. You saved 2 lives today, Rose." The pride in his voice warmed her more than the whiskey had. "I suppose I did. There aren't many doctors, male or female, who could have done what you just did," Wade continued. "Dr. Fulton was right about you." Rose looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close he was standing, of the intensity in his blue eyes as they gazed down at her. "What do you mean?" "You were meant for this, for healing, for making a difference." Wade paused, then added softly, "For Presidio." Before Rose could respond, Mrs. Wilson emerged from the bedroom. "Clara's asking for you, Rose. She wants to name the baby after you, if that's all right." Touched beyond words, Rose nodded and rose to her feet, steadier now. "Of course, though I'm not sure how they'll manage Rose for a boy." "Ross," Wade suggested with a smile. "Close enough." When Rose entered the bedroom, Clara was sitting up in bed, her baby nestled in her arms. "Miss Taylor, my husband and I would be honored if you would allow us to name our son Ross after you. You saved his life, saved both our lives." "I'm deeply honored," Rose said, blinking back unexpected tears. "He's beautiful, Clara. Would you like to hold him?" As Rose cradled the tiny infant, marveling at his perfect fingers and the soft tuft of dark hair, something shifted inside her. This was what her father had lived for, not just treating illness, but bearing witness to life's most profound moments. And now she had done the same. Later, as Wade drove her back to town in the Petersons' borrowed wagon, the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. "Quite a day," Wade commented, glancing at her profile. "Yes," Rose agreed softly. "Quite a day. Changed your mind yet about heading back east?" Rose turned to look at him, studying the strong lines of his face, the quiet confidence in his bearing. "Maybe," she admitted. "Dr. Fulton's offer is tempting." "Just his offer?" Wade asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice that she had never heard before. Rose took a deep breath. "No, not just his offer." Wade's hands tightened on the reins. "Rose, I know you've been hurt. Know you have every reason to be cautious, but I think there's something happening between us, something worth exploring." "I said I don't believe in second chances," Rose reminded him, though her voice lacked conviction. "I remember," Wade said with a small smile, "and I said I'd change your mind." "You're very sure of yourself, Mr. Wilson." "Not sure at all," Wade confessed. "Just hopeful and patient." "I can wait until you're ready to trust again." As they approached town, Rose found herself reluctant for the journey to end. There was something about Wade's presence that made her feel both safe and exhilarated, a combination she had never experienced before. "The harvest dance is tonight," Wade reminded her as they reached the boarding house. "I'd still be honored to escort you, but I'll understand if you're too tired after today." Rose considered for a moment. She was exhausted, it was true. but also strangely energized by the day's events, by the knowledge that she had faced a crisis and emerged victorious. "I'd like to go," she decided, "but I'll need an hour to rest and change." Wade's face lit up with pleasure. "I'll be back at 8, he promised. The harvest dance was held in the town hall, a large open space decorated with autumn leaves, pumpkins, and bundles of wheat. A small band played lively tunes, and it seemed the entire population of Presidio and the surrounding area had turned out for the occasion. Rose wore her best dress, a gown of midnight blue silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She had pinned her hair up in a simple but elegant style, with a few curls framing her face as Miss Porter had suggested. When Wade arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze made her blush like a schoolgirl. "You look stunning," he said with simple sincerity. "Thank you," Rose replied. "You look quite handsome yourself." It was true. In his formal dark suit and crisp white shirt, Wade cut an impressive figure. News of Rose's successful delivery of the Peterson baby had spread throughout town, and she found herself the center of attention at the dance. People she had never met approached to shake her hand and express their admiration. "We've been needing a doctor with steady hands," one grizzled old rancher told her. "Especially one who can handle a breech birth." "I'm not a doctor," Rose demurred. "Near enough," the man replied with a wink, "and getting nearer from what I hear." Wade claimed her for the first dance, a lively reel that had Rose laughing as she tried to follow the unfamiliar steps. Wade was a patient partner, guiding her through the movements with a firm hand at her waist. "You're a natural," he told her when the music ended. "Hardly," Rose replied, breathless from the exertion, "but it's fun." For the next dance, a waltz, Wade drew her closer. As they moved around the floor in perfect harmony, Rose felt a sense of rightness she couldn't explain. "A penny for your thoughts," Wade murmured, echoing his words from days earlier. Rose smiled up at him. "I was just thinking how different this is from what I had planned. A week ago, I was determined to return to Boston as soon as possible." "And now?" Wade prompted softly. "Now I'm not so sure," Rose admitted. "There's something about this place, these people. I feel useful here in a way I never did in Boston." "Is that all that's keeping you?" Wade asked, his blue eyes searching hers. Rose hesitated, then decided on honesty. "No, it's not all." Before she could elaborate, the music ended, and they were separated by well-wishers. For the rest of the evening, Rose danced with various partners: the mayor, Dr. Fulton's son, who had come to town in his father's absence, even young Jim Farley, who insisted his broken leg wouldn't stop him from at least one turn around the floor. But her eyes constantly sought out Wade, finding him watching her with a warmth that made her heart race. As the evening drew to a close, Wade reclaimed her for the final dance, a slow waltz that allowed for conversation. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, his hand warm against the small of her back. "More than I expected to," Rose confessed. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "That's Presidio for you," Wade said with a smile. "We don't stand on ceremony, but we know how to make folks feel at home. I'm beginning to see that." As the music swelled around them, Wade drew her slightly closer. "Rose," he said quietly, "I know it's soon and I know you have reasons to be cautious, but I want you to know that I care for you, more than I thought possible after Elizabeth." Rose's breath caught in her throat. "Wade, you don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "Just know that whatever you decide about staying or going, my feelings won't change. And if you do stay, I'd like the chance to court you properly." Rose looked up into his earnest face, so different from Charles's refined features, yet so much more appealing in its honesty and strength. "I think I'd like that," she whispered. The smile that transformed Wade's face was like sunrise over the mountains. "That's all I ask for now. A chance. After the dance, Wade escorted Rose back to the boarding house, their conversation flowing easily as they walked through the quiet streets. On the porch, he turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said softly. "It meant a lot to me." "I enjoyed it," Rose replied honestly. "Thank you for inviting me." Wade hesitated, then leaned forward slowly, giving her ample time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't move, he placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Rose Taylor," he murmured. "Good night, Wade," she whispered back, using his first name without the formal Mr. for the first time. As she watched him walk away, Rose touched her cheek where his lips had been. She had come to Presidio expecting to begin a new life as a wife. Instead, she was considering a new life of an entirely different kind as a healer, as a member of this community, and perhaps, someday, as something more to Wade Wilson. The next morning, Rose was awakened by an urgent knocking at her door. Mrs. Henshaw stood there, her face worried. "Miss Taylor, there's been an accident at the Circle W. A horse threw one of the hands and he's badly injured. Wade sent word asking if you could come." Rose was out of bed in an instant, dressing quickly and grabbing her medical bag. "Did they say what kind of injuries?" "Head wound, possible broken ribs. They're afraid to move him." "I'll need to borrow a horse," Rose said as she pinned up her hair. "Already arranged," Mrs. Henshaw assured her. "Mayor Jenkins's son is waiting outside with his mare, says she's gentle and will get you there quickly." 20 minutes later, Rose was galloping toward the Circle W, her medical bag secured to the saddle. She had never ridden alone at such speed before, but the urgency of the situation overrode her fear. When she arrived at the ranch, Wade was waiting in the yard. His face was drawn with concern, but it lightened slightly at the sight of her. "Thank God you're here," he said, helping her dismount. "It's Miguel, one of our best hands. Horse spooked at a rattlesnake and threw him against a fence post. He hasn't regained consciousness." Rose followed Wade to the bunkhouse, where the injured man lay on a cot. His dark hair was matted with blood from a gash on his temple, and his breathing was labored. "Everyone out except Wade," Rose ordered, her professional demeanor taking over as she opened her medical bag. "I need space to work." The other ranch hands filed out obediently, casting worried glances at their friend. Rose worked methodically, cleaning the head wound first and determining that while serious, the skull appeared intact. The ribs were another matter. At least 2 were broken, and she was concerned about internal bleeding. "We need to get him to town," she told Wade after completing her examination. "He needs more care than I can provide here." "We've got a spring wagon," Wade replied. "I'll have the boys prepare it with blankets to cushion the ride." While they waited, Rose did what she could to stabilize Miguel, bandaging his ribs tightly and applying a cold compress to the swelling on his head. Gradually, the young man began to show signs of regaining consciousness. "That's it, Miguel," Rose encouraged him. "Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Taylor." The injured cowboy's eyelids fluttered open. "Donde estoy?" he mumbled in Spanish. "You're at the ranch," Wade told him, relief evident in his voice. "You had an accident, but Miss Taylor is taking care of you." "Hurts," Miguel groaned, his hand going to his ribs. "I know," Rose said sympathetically. "You've broken some ribs and hit your head. We're going to take you to town where I can care for you properly." "Gracias," Miguel whispered before closing his eyes again. "He's young and strong," Rose told Wade as they supervised the careful transfer of the injured man to the wagon. "With proper care, he should recover fully." Wade's hand found hers and squeezed gently. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly right," Rose assured him. "You kept him still and sent for help." The journey back to town was slow and careful, with Wade driving the wagon while Rose sat beside Miguel, monitoring his condition. By the time they reached Dr. Fulton's office, the young cowboy was more alert, though still in considerable pain. Rose directed Wade and another ranch hand to carry Miguel inside and place him on the examination table. Over the next hour, she cleaned and stitched the head wound, bound the broken ribs more securely, and administered a mild dose of laudanum for the pain. "He needs to stay here where I can watch for signs of complications," Rose told Wade when she had finished. "There's a cot in the back room." "I'll have one of the boys stay with him," Wade offered. "Take shifts." "That would be helpful," Rose agreed. "I'll check on him every few hours." As they stepped outside the examination room, leaving Miguel resting under the watchful eye of a fellow ranch hand, Wade turned to Rose with an expression of profound gratitude. "You've saved 2 lives in as many days," he said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "It's what I'm trained to do," Rose replied modestly. "No," Wade insisted. "It's more than training. It's who you are, Rose, a healer. This town needs you, these people need you." Rose looked up into his earnest face and felt the last of her resistance crumbling. "I'm beginning to think I need them too," she admitted quietly. "Need this place, this life." "And me?" Wade asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think you might need me too someday?" Instead of answering with words, Rose found herself standing on tiptoe to press a soft kiss to his cheek. "I'm beginning to think I might," she murmured. Wade's smile was radiant as he caught her hand in his. "That's all I needed to hear." 3 days later, Rose received a telegram from Dr. Fulton. His brother was improving, but slowly, and he would need to remain in Alpine for at least another 2 weeks. He urged Rose to continue caring for his patients and assured her of his confidence in her abilities. Rose read the telegram twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her pocket. 2 more weeks of being Presidio's acting physician. 2 more weeks to decide if this was the life she wanted permanently, though in her heart she suspected the decision had already been made. That evening, Wade invited her to dinner at his mother's house. It was a quiet affair, just the 3 of them, with Mrs. Wilson serving her famous pot roast and apple pie. "You've made quite an impression on this town," Mrs. Wilson remarked as they lingered over coffee in the parlor afterward. "Everyone's talking about how you saved Clara and her baby, and now Miguel is singing your praises to anyone who'll listen." Rose blushed at the praise. "I was just doing what needed to be done. And doing it exceptionally well," Wade added, his eyes warm as they rested on her face. "Dr. Fulton couldn't have chosen a better successor." "I haven't decided to stay permanently," Rose felt compelled to point out, though the words lacked conviction even to her own ears. Mrs. Wilson and Wade exchanged a knowing look. "Of course not, dear," the older woman said diplomatically. "But if you did decide to stay, you should know that the town council has been discussing building a proper clinic. The old mercantile building on Main Street is standing empty and with some renovation." "A clinic," Rose echoed, surprised. "But that would be expensive." "The town can afford it," Wade assured her. "And the surrounding ranchers would contribute. Good medical care is worth investing in." The idea was tantalizing, a real clinic where she could treat patients properly, perhaps even perform minor surgeries. It was more than she had ever dared to dream of in Boston, where female physicians were still viewed with skepticism at best. "It's a generous offer," Rose said carefully, "but I'm not fully qualified. I would need proper training eventually." "There's a female doctor in San Antonio who takes apprentices," Mrs. Wilson said casually. "She studied in Philadelphia at the Women's Medical College. I've taken the liberty of writing to her about you." Rose stared at the older woman, astonished by her presumption yet touched by her faith. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Mrs. Wilson smiled serenely. Let's just say I recognize quality when I see it, and so does my son. Wade had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Mother, we agreed to let Rose make her own decision without pressure. It's not pressure to present options, Mrs. Wilson retorted. Rose is a sensible woman. She'll choose what's right for her. Later, as Wade walked Rose back to the boarding house under a sky ablaze with stars, they discussed the future cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. If I did stay, Rose said hypothetically, and if I did eventually get proper medical certification, I'd want to establish a real practice. Not just treating colds and setting bones, but providing comprehensive care, especially for women and children. You could do all that and more, Wade assured her. This town would support you, I would support you. Rose glanced at him curiously. Even if it meant I'd be busy at all hours, called away at inconvenient times, Wade smiled. Rose, I'm a rancher. I understand unpredictable schedules and emergencies. We'd make it work. The casual we sent a thrill through Rose. You sound very sure about us. Wade stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I am sure about my feelings for you. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. But I understand if you need more time. Rose looked up at him, at the sincerity in his blue eyes, the strength and kindness in his face. This was a man who had known loss as she had, who understood that second chances were precious and rare. I don't believe in second chances, she said softly, echoing her words from days earlier. Wade's face fell slightly, but he nodded acceptance. I understand. No, Rose continued, squeezing his hands. I don't believe in second chances because what's happening between us isn't a second chance. It's a first chance, a new beginning, completely different from anything that came before. Hope dawned in Wade's eyes. Rose, I'm staying, Wade, she said simply. I'm staying in Presidio. I'm accepting Dr. Fulton's offer, and I'm accepting your offer to court me properly. For a moment, Wade seemed speechless. Then, with a whoop of joy that probably woke half the town, he lifted Rose off her feet and spun her around in the middle of the street. Wade Wilson, she gasped, laughing despite herself. Put me down this instant. What will people think? They'll think I'm the luckiest man in Texas, Wade replied, setting her gently on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. And they'd be right. In the silver moonlight, with the vast Texas sky spreading overhead and the promise of a new life unfolding before her, Rose Taylor looked up at the cowboy who had changed her mind about second chances, about Presidio, and about her own capacity for love. May I kiss you, Rose? Wade asked softly, his eyes never leaving hers. Yes, she whispered. I think it's time. Wade's lips found hers in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise, the promise of days and nights to come. Of a shared future neither of them had imagined just 2 weeks earlier, when a Boston lady stepped off the train into the dust of Presidio, Texas. When they finally parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, Rose Taylor. I think I'm already there, Rose admitted, surprising herself with the truth of the words. 3 months later, on a crisp January day in 1876, Rose stood in the newly renovated clinic on Main Street, surveying her domain with pride. The former mercantile building had been transformed into a modern medical facility with an examination room, a small surgery, a recovery room with 2 beds, and comfortable living quarters upstairs. Dr. Fulton had officially retired the previous month, turning his practice over to Rose with the blessing of the town council. She would still need to complete her formal medical training, but arrangements had been made for her to study with Dr. Eleanor Hayes in San Antonio for several months later that year, A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting a patient. Instead, Wade entered, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Special delivery for Dr. Taylor," he announced with a smile. Rose laughed. "I'm not officially doctor yet. You are to everyone in this town," Wade countered, crossing the room to kiss her lightly. "How's the new clinic feeling?" "Perfect," Rose replied honestly. "I still can't believe how quickly everything came together." "That's Presidio for you," Wade said, echoing his words from months earlier. "We take care of our own." "And I'm one of your own now," Rose teased, though she knew the answer. "You always were," Wade said seriously. "You just didn't know it yet." He handed her the package. "A small housewarming gift for your new clinic." Rose unwrapped it carefully to find a polished brass plaque that read, "Dr. Rose Taylor, physician and surgeon." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Wade, it's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." "There's something else I wanted to ask you," Wade said, suddenly looking nervous in a way she had never seen before. "Something important." Rose's heart quickened as Wade took her hands in his. Over the past 3 months, their courtship had deepened into a love neither had expected to find again, a love built on respect, shared values, and genuine affection. "Rose Taylor," Wade began, his voice husky with emotion, "when you stepped off that train last October, I had no idea you were about to change my life. You brought healing not just to this town, but to my heart." "Wade," Rose whispered, her eyes filling with tears as she realized what was coming. Slowly, Wade lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. "I love you, Rose. I love your intelligence, your compassion, your courage. I love the way you care for others, the way you've embraced this town and made it your own." He paused, drawing a small velvet box from his pocket. "I want to build a life with you, a home, a family, a future. Will you marry me?" The box contained a ring with a single perfect diamond flanked by small sapphires that matched Wade's eyes. It was elegant without being ostentatious, exactly what Rose would have chosen for herself. "Yes," she said without hesitation, her heart overflowing with joy. "Yes, Wade Wilson, I will marry you." As Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to gather her in his arms, Rose thought of that first day in Presidio, how lost and betrayed she had felt, how determined to return to a life that no longer existed. "What are you thinking?" Wade murmured against her hair as he held her close. Rose smiled up at him. "I'm thinking that sometimes the end of one dream is the beginning of a better one." "And is this a better dream?" Wade asked, his eyes searching hers. "It's not a dream at all," Rose replied, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "It's reality, a reality more perfect than anything I could have imagined." Wade's answering smile was all the confirmation she needed that she had made the right choice, that in this man, in this town, in this unexpected life, she had found her true home and her heart's desire. "She said she didn't believe in second chances," Wade whispered, brushing his lips against hers. "And the cowboy said, 'Let me change your mind,'" Rose finished, returning his kiss with all the love in her heart. "And you did, Wade Wilson. You certainly did." 6 months later, on a glorious summer day, Rose Taylor became Rose Wilson in a ceremony attended by the entire town of Presidio. She wore a gown of ivory silk with a crown of wildflowers in her auburn hair and carried a bouquet of desert roses. Clara Peterson was there with her husband and baby Ross, now a chubby, laughing infant. Miguel, fully recovered from his injuries, served as Wade's best man. Dr. Fulton, back from Alpine, gave the bride away, while Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Henshaw dabbed at tears of joy. As Rose spoke her vows to Wade beneath an arch of flowers on the grounds of the Circle W Ranch, she marveled at how completely her life had changed in less than a year. The woman who had stepped off the train in Presidio, heartbroken and alone, was gone. In her place stood Dr. Rose Wilson, beloved physician, cherished wife, respected member of a community that had embraced her as one of their own. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Wade's lips met hers, sealing their vows with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, Rose knew with absolute certainty that she had found her destiny not in the carefully planned future she had once envisioned, but in the unexpected journey that had led her to this moment, this man, this life. And when Wade whispered, "Welcome home, Dr. Wilson," as he led her back down the aisle, Rose's heart was too full for words. She had indeed come home not to a place, but to a love that would sustain and fulfill her all the days of her life. In the years that followed, Rose and Wade built a life together that exceeded both their dreams. The clinic flourished under Rose's care, especially after she completed her formal medical training in San Antonio. Wade expanded the Circle W into one of the most prosperous ranches in West Texas. And their family grew with the addition of 2 sons, and a daughter who filled their home with laughter and love. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky, Rose would remember that fateful October day when she had arrived in Presidio, believing her life was over before it had truly begun. "Any regrets?" Wade would ask occasionally, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway, and Rose would turn to him with a smile that still had the power to quicken his pulse after all their years together. "Not one," she would reply, nestling into the circle of his arms. "Not a single one." For she had learned the most important lesson of all, that sometimes life's greatest disappointments lead to its greatest joys, and that love, like the healing she practiced, could make all things new.